Good morning and welcome to today's webinar, Enhanced Collaborative Model ECM Task Force to Combat Human Trafficking, Supporting Law Enforcement's Role. It's hosted by the Bureau of Justice Assistance.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alyssa Huntoon, and I'm a Senior Policy Advisor with the Bureau of Justice Assistance. And again, thank you so much for joining. Again, as Kate mentioned, the purpose of this webinar is to review key sections in the solicitation and answer those substantive questions that we might be able to that do not address the design or the scope of your application. Just be aware that we might not be able to answer all your questions on this webinar, but there is contact information listed in the solicitation itself for any other additional or follow-up questions that you might have. Specifically, questions are about, I should say, technical questions about how to submit applications, again, are best directed to the information that is left in the solicitation. So again, this purpose is to walk through some key sections, and I'll be joined by my colleagues, Mary Atlas Terry, as well as one of our partners, Sabrina Fernandez from the IACP. A quick look at the agenda to give you a sense of what we will cover. We'll talk about eligibility, the goal and objectives of this funding announcement, talking a little bit more about those specific categories that are available and outline some of the deliverables, talks about the attachments, touch on budget information, and then again give you an underscore information about how to apply the deadline. And then you'll also hear about available training and technical assistance for current task forces, as well as just the general public and for those who are interested in establishing a multidisciplinary collaborative task force. And then we will have time for Q&A. I do want to underscore that this particular solicitation was developed with a template that includes a link to a lot of the information that has usually been included in the solicitation itself. So if you've applied for funding from BJA before, just be aware that there is a link, and the point behind that, of course, is to make these somewhat shorter because we do know that they are lengthy. Again, just wanted to start out with a description of the Bureau of Justice Assistance for those of you who may not be familiar with us. We are part of the Office of Justice Program, and we focus on a range of criminal justice system issues that cross the spectrum specific to the adult criminal justice system. Our mission is to provide leadership and services in grant administration, criminal justice policy development, and that again is to support local, state, and tribal justice systems and strategies. So I wanted to spend a minute just pointing out the eligibility for this solicitation. It's found on the very first page of the solicitation. Essentially, this is public agencies. Those can be state agencies that have law enforcement functions or any local unit of government. And we talk about and describe what we mean by a unit of local government and the solicitation as well. Federally recognized Indian tribes are also eligible to apply. More specifically, for each category, there are some additional eligibility considerations. We're going to go into more detail about these categories later, but for now, in terms of eligibility, the first category is open to any applicant that has a new or recently formed or in the process of forming a multidisciplinary task force to combat human trafficking. For the second category, advancing task force operational effectiveness, this is open to applicants that may have received funding in the past for the enhanced collaborative model, or are a multidisciplinary task force that has been operational for a minimum of 3 years. Please note that there is some restriction here in who can apply. If you are an applicant and have received ECM task force funding in the past 2 fiscal years, that is FY 2017 or FY 2018, you are ineligible to apply for this particular solicitation. So why does BJA put out the solicitation? Why are we making an investment in this area? And really this is to help communities create and develop and sustain a collaborative multidisciplinary task force that will combat all forms of human trafficking. And we also want to support law enforcement's role as a key member of these task forces. As we talk about in the solicitation, and as a part of this particular multidisciplinary model, we really are focusing on how do we better identify victims of all forms of human trafficking, that is both sex and labor, all ages, all genders, and to successfully investigate, refer, and prosecute these crimes at both the state and federal level. In the solicitation and on the slide here, we talk more specifically about the objectives and summarizes what I just mentioned in terms of identifying victims, having a coordinated approach, ensuring that it's victim-centered, that you are investigating and referring and prosecuting these cases, and that the individualized needs of trafficking victims are being addressed through a comprehensive array of services. Please note we go into more detail about these objectives on page 6 of the solicitation. For purposes of this webinar, I wanted to just highlight a few of those. The objectives are for applicants to submit applications that talk about how they will establish and sustain effective leadership structures and protocols within their multidisciplinary task forces, that you'll employ data-driven decision-making, and that you'll regularly use data and analysis to assess your task force operations, to conduct victim-centered and trauma-informed investigations of both sex and labor trafficking, that you're developing and delivering a wide range of training and public awareness activities, and that you, from the beginning, are developing and implementing a long-term sustainability plan. As we all know, federal funding does not last forever. So what are the available categories of funding? The first category 1 is capacity building and infrastructure development. The estimated number of awards here is approximately 5. The dollar amount available is up to $800,000, and these are for 3 years, or 36 months. In the solicitation itself, it talks about any priority considerations, so please be sure to pay attention to those. And the scope for this category here is to really focus your resources and federal funds on capacity building, really working on the task force infrastructure, developing and documenting your protocols, any plans and strategies. You're providing professional development opportunities, conducting training and outreach, and again, having that ongoing task force assessment to see if you are achieving your local objectives, meeting grant deliverables, et cetera. For this category, you are required to partner with a victim service provider that is also seeking funding under the OVC comparable solicitation, direct services to support victims of human trafficking, and there is a specific focus area in that solicitation that is providing support for ECM task forces. Again, later you'll hear from my colleague, Mary from OVC, who will talk more specifically about that. The mandatory activity, again, it's too long to list on a slide, but the mandatory activities are talked about on pages 7 and 8 of this solicitation. And I also wanted to note to please be aware that these awards will be made as cooperative agreements and not grants. And what do we mean by that? This is discussed in more detail in the solicitation on pages 11 and 12, essentially describing the oversight of BJA as part of these awards, and so how we might be more involved in the not necessarily in the day-to-day management, but in the development of your deliverables, how you're working with partners, et cetera. What I did want to make sure I included on the slide here were the deliverables as listed on page 8 for category 1. Again, please make sure you read the solicitation as it goes into more detail. These deliverables talk about developing protocols, developing a process or a strategy for prosecutions, federal prosecutions, but also working, of course, with your local state prosecutors, producing reports that describe those ongoing assessment efforts. The training plan needs to be submitted within the first 12 months, developing public awareness materials. You need to submit a specific plan for conducting victim-centered investigations for both sex and labor, and a task force sustainability plan, at least 6 months prior. So this slide, again, is outlining all the deliverables. So these are all the things that you need to produce and submit to BJA by the end of your grant, and some of them note there are specific timeframes attached for when they need to be submitted. So category 2, again, a similar length of award. Again, it's 3 years, approximately 5 awards, and the maximum award amount here is $900,000. Talk specifically about category 2 on pages 8 through 10 of the solicitation. Again, there are some priority considerations listed there, so please note those. The scope of category 2 is different, obviously, than category 1, and it's for those task forces, again, that have been established for at least a minimum of 3 years, and you're working here to expand your investigation prosecution strategies and tools, broaden task force partnerships, assess task force operations, perhaps in different ways, and again, strengthening those protocols that you have developed. You are also required to partner with at least one victim service provider that has the ability to provide those comprehensive victim services. But the difference in category 2 is that partner may or may not be seeking funding under the OVC solicitation. So there is flexibility here. So again, category 1, for both categories, you're required to partner with a victim service provider. For category 1, that victim service provider must be also seeking funding under the OVC solicitation. Category 2, it's optional whether or not you're partnering with somebody that is also seeking funding under the OVC solicitation. They may be, but it is not required. Please also make sure you read through the mandatory activities that are listed on page 9. And again, the awards here under category 2 will be made as cooperative agreements and not grants. Deliverables specifically for category 2 that are outlined on pages 9 and 10 of the solicitation. Here there's a focus specifically for that you're developing a strategy on how you're going to increase labor trafficking cases at both the state and federal level. Likely going to be connected to the process that you develop for strategy for federal prosecution. You are also going to be producing annual reports describing your assessment and analysis efforts. And you will also be required to develop a minimum, can be more, of 2 peer-to-peer learning tools or resources to share with other law enforcement entities and communities. In the solicitation itself, we talk about what some examples of these peer-to-peer learning tools might be. Those are just examples. It is not exhaustive of all the types of tools or resources that you as a task force may decide to develop. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague from OVC, Mary.
Hello, everyone. This is Mary Atlas Terry. I work with the Office for Victims of Crime, which is in the Department of Justice. OVC is the federal agency within the Department of Justice that's responsible for providing funding for crime victim service providers across the United States. And we provide funding on behalf of a lot of different crime victim services, but today I'm going to talk to you specifically about our plans for related to services for victims of human trafficking. OVC and BJA have been working collaboratively on different versions of this multidisciplinary task force initiative since about 2004, and OVC is very, very happy to partner with them again this year. As Alyssa mentioned earlier, we're offering this funding to the law enforcement and victim service partners within the task forces a little differently than we have in the past, but we anticipate that we still will have similar results in really supporting a coordinated approach to combating human trafficking. As Alyssa said, Category 1 applicants must partner with a victim service provider that's seeking funding under the OVC solicitation that you see listed on this slide. That's the exact name of the solicitation that you'll be looking for when it is released. It's the OVC 2019 Direct Services to Support Victims of Human Trafficking. Service providers associated with victim service providers associated with Category 2 task forces may apply for the OVC funding, but it's not required. And it's possible because some of the service providers associated with Category 2 task forces may have dedicated funding to provide a comprehensive array of services already. Unfortunately, many of OVC's solicitations are still under final review and have not yet been posted for the public, but please be on the lookout for them. When it's released, this OVC solicitation will be posted on grants.gov and also on the OVC grants and funding page at www.ovc.gov. And there will be a specific focus area within this solicitation that service providers working within task forces may apply for specific funding. On the OVC grants and funding page, you'll also see a place where you can sign up to receive email notifications when any OVC solicitation is released, and we really encourage you to sign up for those notifications. When it is released, OVC will host a webinar very similar to this one to explain the OVC funding opportunity and describe the steps that are needed to apply. So within this BJA solicitation, BJA outlines that the victim service provider partner must be able to offer coordinate a comprehensive array of services for victims of all forms of human trafficking that might be identified by the task force. This means a comprehensive array of services must be available to address the individualized needs of victims of both sex trafficking or labor trafficking, involving male victims, female victims, adults, minors, foreign national victims, and U.S. citizens. The services that should be made available to victims are outlined on Appendix A on page 25 of the BJA solicitation and will be outlined in more detail in the OVC solicitation when it's released. Examples of services that must be made available or coordinated for victims include, but are not limited to the ones you see on your screen there: case management, shelter, medical and dental, mental health and substance abuse, just a wide range of services that victims of trafficking typically require. And they're intended to support the individualized needs of victims. So that's why the case management is so important. So I wanted to a little bit more about the roles of victim service providers. It's not only to provide services to victims. As you look through the goals and objectives stated on pages 6 through 10 of the BJA solicitation, victim service providers and other key partners play a role in many of these activities listed. Victim service providers are critical in helping the task force ensure that the activities that they conduct are victim-centered and trauma-informed. So, for example, the BJA solicitation describes that victim service providers can help establish task force leadership, participate in the community assessment, and making data-driven decisions along the life of the project. They can help the development of task force protocols so that they're victim-centered and trauma-informed. They can help inform training, public awareness and outreach, and inform and help the task force implement a sustainability plan. Now I'm going to turn this back over to Alyssa, who will talk a little bit more about how to apply, but my contact information is at the back of this slide deck.
Thank you, Mary. All right, we're going to transition back into attachments, which are outlined on pages 17 to 20 of the solicitation. I do want to point everyone's, or just direct your attention to the end of the solicitation. We do always include sort of a sample checklist that I recommend everyone go through because it is really helpful in making sure that you've included all the right components in addition to those attachments. And what we're spelling out for you here is those attachments that are required for all applicants under the solicitation, and there are just a couple that are specific to Category 2. So all applicants must attach a memorandum of understanding or a memorandum of agreement. In the solicitation, we give you a few key bullets about what that MOU should include. And who is required to be on that MOU, in addition to making some recommendations, or who we strongly recommend that you include on there as part of, again, the key partners of this multidisciplinary and collaborative task force. Everyone, all applicants, must attach a task and timeline, position descriptions or resumes for key positions. Also, the plan for ongoing assessments and task force operations. Everyone needs to include that attachment. And lastly, subrecipient and procurement disclosures, if it's applicable. So if you are going to be working with subawards and subcontracts and things like that. Category 2 has some different, more specific attachments. One is the Task Force Sustainability Plan. The other is a plan for conducting victim-centered investigations. And the last is a training plan. So these are all attachments for Category 2 that need to be included as part of the application. So those are not deliverables. This is different. These are things that you actually need to submit as part of your application that can demonstrate that you have those things in place already. Apologies, just a moment of technical delay. Okay, now we're on to budget information. So again, I mentioned earlier that this particular solicitation was issued under one of our newer templates, which consolidated a lot of the information that's generally included in writing in the solicitation itself into an online resource guide. That is the OJP Grant Application Resource Guide. And it's referenced and hyperlinked in multiple places in the solicitation. So please be sure to go there because that might be where you're finding some information that you were looking for in the solicitation itself. You've seen it in past solicitation, now it's going to be online. And again, that is to help shorten and reduce the length of the solicitations and have it be more easily accessible and searchable online. So a lot of specific information about financial management, federal financial management is going to be available on that link in that website. I did want to point out on pages 15 and 16, we outline any specific budget requirements for the solicitation. It talks about a couple of different required trainings and travel, and also points out, generally here is just this, talks about the scope of funds and the intent of these funds under this particular solicitation is really meant to focus on key task force programmatic activities that include task force coordination, law enforcement, investigations, prosecutions, personnel, that professional development and training, and action research, which also is the same thing as sort of that ongoing data analysis and assessment of task force operations. Next, hopefully on your screen, you see the how to apply and application deadline. Again, this is all included in the solicitation. You must be registered and submit through grants.gov. Again, we have the link again there for the application resource guide. Applications are due 11:59 p.m. on Eastern Time on June 11th. That is a hard deadline. Please be aware. Please do not try to submit your applications at 11:58 p.m. Again, I know it takes a lot of work to pull these together, and especially a program like this when there's so many different partners, that is a hard and fast deadline. Please do all that you can to ensure that you're doing the work to register and get your information in the system well before 11:59 p.m. on June 11th. Again, any sort of technical questions that you have or problems with submitting the application and how to do it, contact information is on there in the solicitation itself. Okay, and training and technical assistance. Hopefully you're seeing the slide. Sorry, another moment of technical difficulty.
All right. Yes, we're having a little bit of a technical problem. Give us a moment. Michelle, can you pass the ball to Kate, please?
What I wanted to do is just spend a moment here talking about training and technical assistance, and then you'll hear from our partner on that. As I've talked through the solicitation, I've mentioned that there are a wide variety of mandatory activities, and there's a wide variety of deliverables that we ask grantees to provide to us. And so we realize that that takes a lot of work, and from BJA's perspective, we don't necessarily have the resources to come out and visit all the task forces and to be able to provide you support with completing those deliverables. And that is why BJA oftentimes competes and partners with national training and technical assistance providers to help you achieve those objectives. So please be sure that you pay attention to page 10 of the solicitations where we talk about technical assistance, that applicants must agree that you're going to work and partner with the BJA training and technical assistance partner. Hold on one second. Because, again, so BJA regularly partners with national organizations to help us that have significant expertise, and also work to help us disseminate best and promising practices. And part of the way they do that is by regular interaction with all of our sites and going on site to visit. And the current partner for the ECM task forces for the last few years has been the International Association of Chiefs of Police. And they've created a wide range of training and technical assistance resources for you, which you're about to hear. And I did also want to note that part of that is there is some limited assistance available to those that don't have ECM task forces, because, again, everything that they're developing is meant to be made available to the public in general. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sabrina from IACP.
Thank you, Alyssa. My name is Sabrina Fernandez. I'm a program manager with Anti-Human Trafficking Initiatives at the International Association of Chiefs of Police. We're also known as the IACP. For those who are not familiar with our organization, we're a law enforcement membership association of over 30,000 members of all ranks, and we currently have members in over 150 countries. Our aim is to shape the future of the policing profession through advocacy, research, outreach, and education in order to provide for safer communities worldwide. As Alyssa mentioned, we're currently the BJA's dedicated training and technical assistance provider for the ECM-funded human trafficking task forces. And we also do serve law enforcement and prosecutors nationwide who are working in the anti-human trafficking field. We've been providing the task forces support since 2015, collaborating with a number of agencies and partners. A few of them here are up on the screen. We have 2 project partners that are subcontracted with us, John Jay College of Criminal Justice out of the City University of New York. They assist task forces with a lot of efforts regarding evaluation, data collection, assessments, developing protocols, and they also have done a wide array of research for both sex and labor trafficking that they're able to assist task forces in learning a little bit more about how that research information that's been shown across the country can translate into practice. We also have a partner on our project, Equitas, the Prosecutor's Resource on Violence Against Women. They have expertise specifically in prosecutorial strategies, so they assist us with providing training and technical assistance, support, and resources to prosecutors who are working on this issue across the country. In addition, we have a network of subject matter experts through DOJ. They have a Human Trafficking Fellows program that we do work with the fellows that are funded through that program, as well as task forces across the United States and subject matter experts that have worked in this field. We do also partner with other training and technical assistance providers that are funded through the Department of Justice. So, for example, the victim services providers often receive support through OVC's Training and Technical Assistance Center, and we often do joint resources and trainings with that provider as well when we're looking at providing support to the entire task force. In terms of some of the ideas of resources and opportunities that we have to work with the task forces, we have a lot going on here, but some of our main objectives with our current funding through BJA is to support the task forces to meet their grant deliverables. So, for example, helping task forces develop protocols, reviewing or editing protocols, looking at sustainability planning, giving guidance or coaching on their evaluation activities. We also have a current number of resources that are available to the task forces and to law enforcement and prosecutors nationwide, which might include roll call trainings. We have a number of archived webinars on various topics regarding investigating and prosecuting and identifying human trafficking across the United States. We are working with the task forces that are currently funded to do some peer-to-peer matching, coaching, and mentoring, where we might match a task force that has more experience with a task force that is newer or is perhaps challenged with a particular stumbling block. So if we have someone that has already been able to work through an issue, we'll connect them with the task force that's seeking assistance to be able to brainstorm and get some guidance and coaching from peers in the field that are doing the work. We are doing, and we will continue to do, site visits with the task forces, which basically entails kind of meeting with everybody that's on the task force, the key members, core members, and multidisciplines, to be able to find out kind of how things are going and see how we can assist and what resources we can provide. We are looking at developing a program for this upcoming year, which would include those that are funded under this solicitation, to have a task force liaison for each grantee. So that would mean that there would be a dedicated person that would be either from our staff or from one of our partner agencies that would be able to keep regular contact and provide support and answer questions, provide guidance, and make referrals to other agencies that might be able to assist and or to resources that are currently available, or referrals back to us to be able to develop new resources for all the work that the task forces will be doing. Additionally, we typically do a kickoff webinar for all the new task forces that are newly funded. So that would be coming up likely either at the end of this year or the beginning of next year in 2020. We also do an in-person orientation meeting, bringing all the newly funded task forces together. That typically happens in either the spring or summer of the year following the grant award. So that would mean spring or summer of next year if that follows what we've done in the past years. We do have a regular webinar series, so those that would be funded under the solicitation would get communication on what those webinars would be in terms of topic, and to be able to save the date and time on calendars. We We have an online library of trainings, resources, and publications targeted to law enforcement prosecutors and judges that we're currently that's currently in development. That should be readily available to the public, and that includes those that are funded and those that are not funded within the next couple of months. So you can contact us for more information if you want to have access to that. And we also do provide in-person trainings and online training, both some that are in a current library of resources that are available, but also we do customized training and technical assistance. So if a task force has identified that they have a particular training need that hasn't been met, we can work with them to see if we're able to provide that for them. And then the last thing is we do have an online community for the task forces. It's called Task Force Connect. It's a secure platform online that is available only for those that are funded through this ECM Human Trafficking Task Force program. It includes both those that are funded through the BJA grant and the OVC grant, so it is multidisciplinary in nature. And there are two sub-communities. One is a law enforcement sensitive community, so if there's anything that law enforcement need to share that they may not want to publicize to the entire group, they are able to do that. And there's also a task force coordinator community that is in development and should be launched in the next month or so that task force coordinators have a place to connect, brainstorm, and share resources. For more information on any of these opportunities or tools, whether you're more curious about how our agency can support task forces once they're funded, or if you're looking for something immediately in terms of what resources we're able to provide, I have the website and our email and phone up on the screen here. You can contact us at humantrafficking@theiacp.org. And we look forward to working with all of you that are going to be seeking funding and those that are able to win the award. So good luck. And I'm going to pass it over to Kate.
Oh, so looking on your screen right now is a slide with more information on BJA funding. The first link is for the BJA funding page, and you can find information about upcoming competitive grant announcements on that page. The second link is for the BJA funding webinars. On this page, you can register for upcoming webinars, and you can also obtain the transcript, slides, and a recording for past webinars. In addition, earlier this year, BJA produced 4 grant applicant education webinar series, and those are also posted under the URL listed on the slide. The 4 webinars in that series were dedicated to the funding process, so things that you need to know in order to be a successful applicant, how to upload your budget, what should be included, how to obtain a DUNS number, all those types of mechanics. So if you go back and you can review those webinars, and that might help you as you move forward in this funding opportunity and future funding opportunities.
So for more information on OVC funding, we invite you to visit the OVC grants and funding page, and that's at www.ovc.gov. And this is the contact information on your screen for our presenter, Mary Atlas-Terry, OVC Victim Justice Program Specialist. You might want to jot down her contact information if you have a question or two that we don't get to today. I'm sure she would be more than happy to have a chat with you. The application, there's application assistance and support available to you through the National Criminal Justice Reference Service Response Center, that's NCJRS, which you're probably familiar with. You can find them at ncjrs.gov. They provide solicitation support and general assistance, and they have links to all kinds of OJP funding opportunities and resources. You should contact them by email at grants@ncjrs.gov. They also have a web chat function, toll-free number, and all of that information is on the screen here. Again, a handy resource as you're moving through this process. For further application assistance, you should go to grants.gov, and you can find technical assistance with submitting the application. Customer support hotline is available, 800-518-4726 or 606-545-5035. The grants.gov support hotline is operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with the exception of federal holidays. And the email information is on the screen. Jot that down. Again, more helpful information as you're moving through this process. And why not stay connected throughout the year? Social media is available to you for you to access at any time throughout the year. Facebook, Twitter, and RSS feed. As always, you can go to BJA's website, www.bja.gov, and check out funding opportunities, publications, and all kinds of other resources. There are a lot of recommended resources that will help you through this process. The OJP Funding Resource Center, the Department of Justice Grants Financial Guide is of particular interest and assistance to folks going through this process. The OJ Grants Financial Management Online Training and the OJP Grant Application Resource Guide, as well as NIJ's CrimeSolutions.gov. All of those resources are listed on the screen, and it would be a good idea to jot these URLs down and help you. These will all help you out as you move through this process. So we are at the point now where we are going to open up the lines to questions. We've had a couple of questions come in.
Great, and thank you, Kate, and this is Alyssa. And just one of the questions does get to whether or not this information will be available and posted online, the transcript. So I'll turn it back to Kate, but earlier in the slide deck, we did talk about the BJA page that had the solicitation webinars, and they would be posted there. But if there's anything additional that Kate wants to add.
This particular webinar the recording of this webinar, the transcript, the slides will be available within the next 10 days at that resource.
Great, thank you. So as I'm looking through questions, thanks so much for sending those. We did receive one that asked about concrete examples or specific costs that we're looking to support with this grant. And again, speaking only from what's in the solicitation itself, the costs for this program are meant to be focused on key programmatic activities, again, task force coordination, law enforcement investigations and prosecutions, training, and action research. We also received a question around victim service partners, and if it's possible to have a lead provider for sex trafficking and a lead provider for labor trafficking. Again, I can't answer questions about how you design your task force, but in the solicitation itself, you're required to partner with at least one or a minimum of one lead victim service provider. Again, also in the section on MOUs, in terms of who's required to sign, it is a lead law enforcement agency and a lead victim service provider. So that's how it's spelled out in the solicitation. Another question related to the OBC solicitation and whether or not when we anticipate that might be released, if days or weeks.
Yes, this is Mary from OBC. We do not have a release date yet, so it's not a matter of days. It's probably a little bit more than a week, possibly.
We have a question about applying for Category 2 and if it's a requirement to partner with the federal partners, FBI, U.S. attorneys, HSI. And I would refer you back to the solicitation where we talk about who the required partners are, victim service providers. Then when we talk about the deliverables in Category 2, and the activities. One of those speaks directly to an ongoing partnership and relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And then in terms of the MOU, there are, the lead law enforcement agency and the lead victim service provider, and then the other partners, which are strongly recommended that you include as part of your MOU. And another question related to victim services. Again, it's at least a minimum of 1. There is a question just getting some clarification on the action research attachment. I might need to get back to you on that one just so I can take time to dig through. So we'll get back to that participant on the question about that attachment. There's a question about eligibility. So can a state grant administrator, like VOCA, VAWA, apply on behalf of a state law enforcement agency? That one, again, I can't answer right now. Sometimes on the questions of eligibility, we do have to go back and confer with our legal counsel to make sure that that entity does qualify. So that could be a question that you could submit through the NCJRS, and that will give us the opportunity to review and get you back a written response. And I'm not seeing any other questions, but I'll just give it a minute or here, or a few seconds to see if anybody else has any questions. And to just, again, encourage you, if you feel like you had a question that you didn't get a chance to ask, or a question was asked that wasn't answered thoroughly for you, please do submit that question through NCJRS so we can make sure we get you a response.
If you have submitted any questions to the chat box, please move those over to the Q&A.
I do see another question just around eligibility and who's eligible. And again, I would, about if you've got funding in the past, I would refer you to the eligibility page. Essentially, categories 1 and 2, it is open to applicants that have received past ECM funding, except for if you've received funding from us in FY17 or FY18, and this is for BJA applicants. NCJRS contact information is on slide 27, and it is also in the first, should be in the first couple pages of the solicitation. It is also in the OJP grant application guide, which is online, so it's in multiple places. There's a question about category 2 showing that it's due to be on June 10th. I don't know where it reflects that in the solicitation. I haven't seen that. All applications for this solicitation, just to confirm and validate, are due by 11:59 p.m. on June 11th. Question about costs for project evaluation. Can you share costs for that with a partner? Again, it is up to you as the applicant as how you want to design and submit your budget and your application with your partners. There's a question about eligibility, which I'm not sure of. If you have a question about whether or not your particular entity or organization or agency is eligible, the best thing to do is submit that to NCJRS so that we can take a look and make sure that you qualify. Again, this is meant to be for those state agencies and units of local government that have law enforcement functions. There's a question about whether or not there's a specific percentage of the budget that is required for any sort of evaluation or, again, ongoing assessment, data analysis and research, and there is not a particular requirement in this solicitation this year. Questions about, again, getting into sort of the technical piece around matches, those questions you should need to submit to NCJRS. Any questions about the match, federal, any of the financial pieces, please submit through NCJRS. again, I appreciate and really like everyone asking these questions. Again, I know these are lengthy solicitations. There's a lot of information in there, so if there's any way we can just at least direct you to the right place, happy to do so. And again, this one looks a little different because a lot of the information has been pulled and put online in a more user-friendly, searchable guide. And I'm not seeing any other new questions.
Well, it appears that we have answered the questions that have come in. Again, if you have some questions and we're not able to submit them, you can, we have one more coming in. We are just about out of time now, and folks who have had questions, we were delighted to answer them. If you have additional questions, please contact the National Criminal Justice Reference Service. Want to let you know that you can also sign up for funding notices and subscribe to receive email notifications of new opportunities, and sign up to receive the bi-weekly Just Info newsletter, as well as the weekly funding news from NCJRS. We ask you to make sure that you check out, that you email NCJRS at grants@ncjrs.gov. I believe that we are coming to the close of our webinar, and we thank you for participating in the webinar today. And on behalf of the Bureau of Justice Assistance and all of our presenters today, thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.